When Elena Marquez appeared near Animas Forks in August 2008, she was almost unrecognizable, barefoot, emaciated, with long matted hair and wrapped in a tattered piece of cloth instead of clothing. The woman had vanished 5 years earlier along with her husband in one of the most rugged and inaccessible areas of the San Juan Mountains, where everyone believed she had died. But the most terrifying part was not her appearance. The most terrifying part was what she said about those 5 years, about what had happened underground, and about the man who had kept her alive in the darkness all that time. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In the early afternoon of September 14, 2003, Elena Marquez and Daniel Cross left the town of Ouray after parking their vehicle at the lot near the entrance to the route leading up to Engineer Pass, one of the steepest, most unstable sections with rapidly changing weather conditions in the San Juan mountain range. They signed the hiker registry at the local information station with a planned route along Cinnamon Pass Road and returning before sunset. According to the registry, the two were carrying small backpacks, water, light jackets, and intended only a short hike to combine physical exercise with some space to ease the recent tension between them. Many other visitors were present at the trailhead at that time, and one group of hikers coming the opposite way reported seeing Elena leading ahead, walking focused, about several dozen meters in front of Daniel. Daniel was keeping a slower pace, frequently looking back at the mountainsides on both sides as if checking for something. This is considered the last time witnesses saw Elena still on the trail. The weather began to deteriorate as they went deeper: stronger winds, low-hanging clouds, and rapidly reduced visibility, especially on the narrow, steep sections along the rock faces overlooking the valley. Around 5:40 p.m., according to Daniel's initial statement in the report, Elena had moved ahead and disappeared from his sight when entering a small bend. Daniel claimed he heard an unusual sound echoing from the ravine on the right, causing him to pause for a few minutes to check the area, but he found nothing specific. When he returned to the main trail, Elena was no longer at the spot where he thought she would be waiting. Daniel called her name multiple times and searched both directions along the trail, but found no sign of Elena or her belongings. After a period of searching on his own without results, he decided to head back to the nearest ranger station, taking nearly an hour in the growing darkness. He arrived at 7:13 p.m. and reported Elena missing. The on-duty staff fully recorded the time, the last known location where Elena was seen, the weather conditions at the time of disappearance, and determined the priority level of the case. Elena Marquez's missing person file was created immediately afterward, marking the start of the official search response in the area. Immediately after Elena Marquez's missing person file was created at the ranger station, the Ouray County Search and Rescue Unit activated its rapid response protocol and mobilized experienced teams for high-altitude searches. Within less than an hour, SAR members were at the trailhead near Engineer Pass, dividing the area into a grid search, starting from the point Daniel Cross reported as the last place Elena was seen. Ground search teams were deployed in small groups along different directions on Cinnamon Pass Road and the side paths connecting to the valley below. Meanwhile, the coordination unit contacted to deploy a helicopter equipped with a FLIR camera to detect heat signatures over a wider range, planned to operate as soon as it got dark. At the same time, K-9 units were brought up from the town of Ridgeway, using a piece of cloth from Elena's belongings in the vehicle to start scent sampling and sweeping low-traffic trail sections. However, the early deployment faced obstacles due to terrain and faster-than-expected weather changes. As the search teams expanded the range eastward and southeast of the Engineer Pass area, strong winds sweeping the slopes significantly limited visibility. The steep terrain, loose rocks, and crumbly soil underfoot made it difficult for SAR to safely open additional search lines, especially on narrow slopes at risk of rockfall from above. By nightfall, temperatures dropped sharply, and clouds rising from the valley made the FLIR helicopter unable to operate stably, with heat signals interfered with and no clear heat sources identified in the expected area. The K-9 units only followed a short scent trail extending about 200 meters from the main trail, but soon lost it, possibly due to constantly shifting winds or traces disturbed by prior passers-by. In the first 24 hours, no physical evidence or specific traces were collected to confirm which direction Elena had left the trail. Daniel Cross, after providing initial information at the ranger station, also directly joined the search process. He accompanied a SARE group retracing the exact route he described in his statement, pointing out the last spot Elena was seen and providing details he believed could help narrow the search area. Daniel's participation was noted by SARE as support from the primary witness, but it did not yield any new reference points. On the second and third days, SARE expanded the range a few more miles northeast and to side paths leading down to the valley. Teams thoroughly checked areas prone to accidents such as ravines, sheer cliffs, fallen tree zones, or rarely used side trails. Still, there were no clear footprints, personal items, or any soil disturbance sufficient to directly link to Elena's disappearance. Topographic maps were used to assess landslide risks, but no unusual geological events were recorded in the time frame of Elena's disappearance. By the end of the 72-hour mark, SARE compiled all covered areas, cross-referenced with Daniel's route description and weather data. The conclusion, after the initial search phase, was that there was no evidence determining Elena's direction of movement after she left Daniel's site. The search made no clear progress, and the file was moved to an extended evaluation phase. In the first 3 days, the search yielded no definitive signals, and as more days passed without SARE and the Ouray County Sheriff's Office finding clear traces, investigators were forced to shift the file to a comprehensive evaluation phase to determine whether to continue or narrow the scope. In the first interagency meeting after 72 hours of searching, representatives from Essair County Police, area rangers, and the Sheriff's Office reviewed all information gathered from Daniel Cross, the hiker groups who encountered the couple on the trail, and environmental data from the afternoon Elena vanished. Field reports showed no significant soil disturbance at potential accident points, no abandoned personal items, and no continuous movement path leading away from the registered road. On that basis, police drafted a preliminary assessment concluding there was no evidence of criminal activity and no factors proving Elena was attacked or forcibly taken. 3 hypotheses were included in the official report for risk classification. First, Elena may have slipped and fallen into one of the steep ravines, where access is difficult and survival chances are low. Second, she may have encountered wildlife, though rangers noted no unusual activity from black bears or mountain lions at that time. And third, Elena may have intentionally left Daniel due to tension between them, choosing to branch off onto another trail without informing him. Alongside these assessments, a few minor ranger reports were added to the file, including information about unusual lights seen on the night Elena disappeared on the eastern slope of Red Mountain Hash 3. But since there were no additional witnesses, no traces recorded at the scene, and no direct connection to the route Elena was believed to have taken, this report was not prioritized as a lead and was temporarily filed under data to monitor. After more than a month of deploying forces, including ground searches, helicopter sweeps, and witness statement cross-checks, authorities concluded there was no longer sufficient basis to maintain large-scale search operations. The case file was moved to unresolved status and officially closed, to be reopened only if new evidence emerged. In the following years, Ouray County Police periodically reviewed the file each summer when hiker numbers increased. But reviews were procedural since no new reports supplemented the old data. Trail patrol teams noted seasonal terrain changes, including minor landslides and stream flow shifts, but found no factors potentially related to Elena's disappearance. Her missing person file was also entered into the federal database, but no identity matches were recorded in other states, reinforcing the initial assessment that Elena did not leave the San Juan area voluntarily. Police occasionally received vague reports from visitors claiming to have seen a woman resembling Elena in small towns around the mountains, but cross-checks concluded no connection. Some anonymous calls were recorded, mostly speculation or unverifiable information that prevented the file from progressing. Extended search efforts requested by the family ultimately could not be implemented because authorities lacked basis to identify a new focus area, while volunteer search teams were restricted from accessing dangerous mountain regions without specific information. Over time, Elena's case was classified among unsolved missing persons cases, becoming a case referenced in SARE training materials as a typical example of the limits of search operations in high mountain terrain. 4 years passed without any new leads, until a completely unexpected event occurred. In August 2008, while traveling by off-road vehicle along the route leading into the Animas Forks area, near the town of Silverton, a group of tourists from Illinois suddenly spotted a woman standing motionless at the edge of the road, next to a low embankment, her body exhausted, as if she had just covered a long distance in conditions of dehydration and low oxygen. As they approached, they saw the woman holding a boy about 2 years old, both clearly fatigued, with dirty clothing and no personal belongings. The tourists immediately stopped their vehicle, approached cautiously to avoid startling the mother and child. The woman reacted weakly, showing no signs of aggression or flight, but also not initiating communication. Seeing the concerning health condition, the group decided to help both onto the vehicle and head back toward Silverton for medical assistance. During the drive, the woman only looked down, holding the child tightly and not responding to any questions, leading the tourists to believe she might have amnesia or be in shock. Upon reaching a local small medical facility, staff admitted them and created a preliminary record, noting signs of exhaustion and requesting a full examination. Since the woman had no identification, the hospital coordinated with Silverton police to use the fingerprint identification system for a database search. The results from the federal database confirmed the woman was Elena Marquez, reported missing in Ouray in September 2003. The identity match immediately triggered special procedures for long-term missing persons who reappear, requiring the hospital and local police to notify Ouray County and Colorado state authorities. The boy accompanying Elena had no information in the database and no identifying features linked to any reported child cases in neighboring counties, prompting authorities to record the child as an unidentified individual. When police approached Elena for basic questions, they found she completely failed to respond to standard questions related to her disappearance, the time she left Ouray, or the circumstances of her appearance at Animas Forks. Throughout this process, Elena only held the child tightly and showed wariness toward everyone, with no words or gestures providing useful information. The 2003 missing person file was reactivated and removed from cold status while being reclassified as a case with suspicious signs, potentially involving detention or abduction. Police immediately notified the Ouray County Sheriff's Office, requesting coordination to reevaluate old information and open a new investigation file based on Elena's condition at the time she was found. The appearance, with an unregistered child, in any health or administrative system prompted authorities to open a parallel file to determine the boy's identity and origin. News that Elena was alive was quickly relayed to federal and state agencies, forcing authorities to fully reactivate the entire 2003 file and set aside all previous hypotheses. In the initial intake phase, the top priority was verifying identity, ensuring absolute safety for Elena and the child, and collecting necessary medical data before proceeding with any investigative assessment. These very first medical results began to answer the question of why Elena could have disappeared from the San Juan Mountains for many years without leaving any trace. The initial examination results at Silverton Hospital showed that Elena Marquez's condition was not the consequence of a few days of being lost, but clearly reflected a prolonged process of depletion in an environment severely restricted in terms of light, living space, and nutrition. The medical team conducted blood tests, bone checks, skin examinations, and metabolic indicators before compiling a detailed medical record. The blood test results revealed an abnormally low vitamin D level, far below the minimum required to maintain normal physiological activity, a clear indicator that Elena had lived in an environment with almost no sunlight for an extended period. Examinations around the wrists and ankles noted faint bruises, small scars, and caul-used skin in repeating circular patterns, consistent with signs of having been restrained with ropes or hard materials for prolonged periods. Although the wounds had healed, traces remained. Elena's bone density was also lower than the average for individuals aged 29-34, reflecting a lack of movement or severely restricted activity over many years. Her body weight index was significantly reduced compared to the average for adult women in 2003, and her overall physical condition indicated a poor diet lacking diversity and essential micronutrients. At the same time, cortisol tests and other biological indicators showed chronic stress occurring continuously over many years, inconsistent with short-term trauma and more compatible with an environment involving prolonged stress factors. The young boy accompanying Elena also underwent a general examination. Although he showed no signs of acute malnutrition, the child exhibited manifestations related to development in a restricted environment, paler skin than average, slow reaction to bright light, low muscle tone, and weaker limb movements compared to children of the same age. Doctors noted that the boy's skull and long bones had developed normally, but he lacked the typical exploratory movement signs seen in young children, suggesting he may have lived in a confined, unchanging space with little opportunity for natural movement. This information heightened suspicions that not only Elena, but the child as well, had lived for a considerable time under environmentally restricted conditions. After the healthcare system transferred all reports to the Silverton Police and the Ouray County Sheriff's Office, the investigative agency cross-referenced the medical data with the 2003 missing person file. The combination of indicators, lack of light, restraint scars, low bone density, and prolonged stress, led the investigative team to assess that the scenario of Elena being held in an enclosed space for many consecutive years was the most fitting. Additionally, the presence of the boy with no records, who also showed signs of development in a restricted environment, ruled out the possibility that Elena had been living outdoors as a wanderer or freely assisted by someone. Based on these biological evidences, the investigative agency determined that the case could no longer be treated as a standard missing person incident or accident, but must be reclassified as a case showing signs of coercion, confinement, and possibly involving organized criminal activity or prolonged individual criminal behavior. The hospital and police coordinated to notify state authorities, requesting the formation of a joint task force to re-examine all 2003 data, including the hiking route, the location where Elena disappeared, overlooked ranger reports, and environmental factors in the area. In parallel, the investigative agency established an independent file for the boy to facilitate the process of identifying his identity and birth circumstances. From the medical results, the entire analytical direction of the case shifted to evaluating the possibility that Elena had been held in an enclosed structure, such as a room, basement, or abandoned mine, with an environment lacking light and restricting movement for many years prior to being found at Animas Forks. Immediately after receiving the medical report confirming that Elena Marquez had lived under conditions of restricted light and movement for an extended period, the federal investigative team, in coordination with the Colorado State Forensics Laboratory, proceeded to collect all remaining samples from her body and clothing for analysis of her living environment during the missing period. Technicians collected soil samples from the shoe soles, crevices in the shoes, pant legs, outer jacket fabric, and fine dust particles adhering to Elena's hair. They also gathered small debris from under her fingernails, dust in clothing folds, and residual dirt on her skin to increase accuracy in comparisons. All samples were sealed according to protocol and transferred to the Mineralogy Analysis Laboratory to determine the composition of the soil Elena had been exposed to prior to being discovered at Animas Forks. Initial results showed that the soil samples adhering to the shoes and clothing contained a high proportion of red mica, a mineral characteristic of areas with silver mining activity in the San Juan Range from the late 19th century. The red mica content, combined with the presence of oxidized sulfide particles and shale fragments, led the analysis team to rule out the possibility that Elena had been traveling for long on ordinary trails, as the mineral structure of the soil on her shoes did not match the common surface soil on current hiking routes, but was more compatible with areas deeply excavated in the past and now rarely visited. When cross-referenced with the geological database managed by the Colorado Geological Survey, the analysis team determined that this type of soil was densely present in old silver mine regions stretching from Red Mountain Pass to areas adjacent east of Silverton. The discovery of red mica in the soil samples played a crucial role as it allowed narrowing down Elena's former living environment from a vast natural range of hundreds of square miles to abandoned mining structures with similar geological characteristics. The investigative team requested the reopening of all historical mine maps, including areas exploited at varying depths and potentially containing enclosed underground spaces. The geological maps were layered by era, type of mineral extracted, and tunnel depth for direct comparison with the collected soil samples. Deeper analysis revealed that the combination of red mica, oxidized sulfides, and flaking shale was most commonly found in 3 mine clusters, one near Red Mountain #3, one northeast of Silverton, and a smaller one on the west slope of Engineer Pass. When classifying by the potential for habitable spaces, the investigative team noted that many old tunnels had collapsed or been naturally filled, no longer capable of forming enclosed environments. However, some tunnels remained in a semi-collapsed state, not fully sealed, and could have been utilized or manually accessed by someone. The dust samples from Elena's hair provided supporting evidence by showing the presence of pyrite minerals and a small amount of magnetite, both found in deeper mining shafts with limited ventilation, consistent with the doctor's assessment that Elena had lived in a low-light space. Comparing the various mineral samples, the analysis team concluded that Elena had not merely briefly contacted mine soil, but most likely lived in an area with matching minerals for an extended time, as the adhesion of mineral dust to hair strands reflected continuous presence rather than just a few days. From this, the suspect clusters were narrowed by radius according to the mineral analysis results. The first cluster was around Red Mountain #3, where unusual lights had been reported in the year Elena disappeared, but not investigated at the time. The second cluster extended along the east slope of Silverton, with many deep tunnels but few natural entrances. The third cluster had fewer mines, but was close to the trail where Elena vanished. Overall, all 3 clusters had potential relevance, but the Red Mountain #3 cluster was considered the primary focus due to the best soil match and an unprocessed ranger report from 2003. The investigative team compiled a list of abandoned mines in the 3 clusters and prioritized them based on mines with tunnels wide enough to sustain human existence long-term, mines with old but still functional ventilation structures, and mines near trails or where witnesses had reported anomalies. Concurrently, the technical team prepared safety equipment for mine surveys, including gas detectors, cable cameras, and specialized underground lighting. Shifting the investigation toward abandoned mines marked a significant advancement in re-evaluating Elena's disappearance. From a 2003 missing person case with no leads, the file now had clear indicators of the environment she had lived in for years. The investigative agency agreed to shift focus to field checks at mines in the 3 identified geological clusters, starting with the area of highest mineral match and prior related reports, opening a new phase in tracing the origins of Elena Marquez's prolonged disappearance. After the 3 suspect mine clusters were identified based on mineral analysis of soil samples from Elena, the investigative team proceeded with deeper screening by cross-referencing historical mine maps from the 1890-1930 period, with current geological data to identify tunnels still potentially intact. The Colorado State Mine Archives provided detailed information on shaft entrances depths, inclines, and exploitation levels of each mine during its peak activity. The analysis team created a classification table of 148 tunnels and mine areas in the 3 targeted clusters, then eliminated those recorded as fully collapsed or sealed according to geological survey reports from the 1970s to 1990s. For more accurate updated data, the survey team used ground-based LiDAR technology to scan surface terrain around potentially viable mines. LiDAR maps revealed minor differences in soil compression and geological structure, helping identify areas with signs of recent disturbance or slight surface subsidence, characteristic of hollow structures below. Some points in the Red Mountain #3 cluster showed abnormal differences in laser reflectance, suggesting the surface soil there had been moved or disturbed within the past 2 decades. LiDAR data was further combined with ground-penetrating radar surveys to determine the depth and size of remaining underground voids. GPR scanned along mountain slopes, secondary trails, and areas suspected of old shaft entrances. Results showed multiple anomalous return signals, including voids at depths of 10 to 40 feet, matching the average depth of silver mines during their peak era. Some GPR signals indicated the existence of horizontal tunnels with uniform return amplitudes, indicating the underground structures remained relatively intact and not fully collapsed. Combining data from old mine maps, LiDAR, and GPR, the investigative team created a composite diagram showing areas likely to contain spaces usable as temporary residences or human confinement sites. From the initial 148 locations, the list was narrowed to 12 areas, matching the mineral characteristics found on Elena: appropriate tunnel depth, uncollapsed soil structure, and acceptable road access. Of these 12 sites, 5 were in the Red Mountain #3 cluster, 4 in the East Silverton cluster, and 3 on the west slope of Engineer Pass. Some sites had been marked unsafe due to collapse risks, but remained on the list due to the potential for small voids sufficient to sustain life long-term. Narrowing the suspect locations enabled more efficient deployment of field surveys, avoiding wasted resources on collapsed mines or areas mismatched with the analyzed soil. The geological technology team's comprehensive report was transferred to the field examination team to prepare for direct access. The field team received detailed diagrams, including GPS coordinates for each mine, priority levels from high to low, relevant geological parameters, and notes on caution points such as oxygen deficiency risks, landslides, or unstable entrances. The next procedure required the examination team to approach each site in priority order, assess the viability of interior spaces, record signs of recent entry, and collect initial samples for further analysis. Integrating evidence from multiple sources, historical maps, LiDAR data, GPR results, and mineral analysis provided a rational basis for shifting the investigation from broad hypotheses to specific locations, increasing the likelihood of identifying the area where Elena had been during her missing years. From here, responsibility shifted to the field survey team to determine, among the remaining 12 areas, which had a structure stable enough to sustain human existence for many years, as indicated by the medical and forensic evidence. The field investigation team was deployed immediately after the list of 12 suspected locations was handed over from the Geological Analysis Unit, with the mines in the Red Mountain #3 cluster prioritized for initial access due to the high degree of match between the soil sample recovered from Elena and the minerals in the area. The technical team, consisting of mine safety experts, field investigators, and gas measurement technicians, traveled by off-road vehicles to the marked points and conducted surveys of each location to determine the possibility of a usable entrance. Some mines on the list had completely collapsed, with the adits sealed by earth and rock over many years and showing no signs of recent disturbance. Others still displayed entrance structures, but the tunnels inside had caved in, lacked oxygen, or were inaccessible due to steep slopes and high risk of landslides. These inspections were carried out simultaneously over the first 3 days, combined with recording terrain changes, photographing the scene, and collecting surface soil samples for further comparison with existing data. When the team reached the fifth location in the Red Mountain #3 cluster, they discovered an adit that had appeared on historical maps but was no longer clearly identifiable on the surface. Instead of an open void like the other mines, this site featured a wall of stone arranged in a structure distinct from the natural rock formations in the surrounding area. The stones in the outermost layer showed deliberate placement, uniform in size, similar in angles, and bearing traces of slight displacement that did not match the pattern of natural rockfall from the hillside. The field technician assessed that this was most likely an adit that had been sealed with new stone within the past few years. The team decided to conduct a detailed inspection by tapping the surface and using vibration measurement tools. The results indicated that behind the stone layer was not solid, but contained a deep void, with the vibration response consistent with the structure of a block tunnel. Accordingly, the technical team set up temporary safety barriers and began removing the stones in small sections to avoid sudden collapse. The process of reopening the entrance took many hours due to the need to handle each stone carefully to avoid affecting the internal structure and to ensure that once the entrance was opened, the gas environment inside the mine could be immediately checked to prevent risks of oxygen deprivation or toxic gases. When the initial opening was large enough to insert a wired camera, the investigation team observed a dark space with old wooden surfaces and clear signs of artificial construction rather than a natural tunnel. After measuring the gases and confirming safe oxygen levels, the team widened the entrance by a few more feet and entered the space. This mine no longer retained its original structure from early 20th century operations, but had been modified with newer materials, relatively intact timber, steel cables supporting the walls, and some hand-cut planks forming flat surfaces. The layout indicated that someone had renovated the tunnel in recent years. As the team advanced about 15 feet deeper, they discovered a larger expanded space containing signs of habitation, a low wooden platform that could serve as a sleeping area, a crude wooden shelf against the wall, rusted metal cans and scraps of fabric scattered on the floor. The presence of items used by humans over an extended period, along with the spatial arrangement, indicated that this place had been used as living quarters rather than just an abandoned mine. Certain spots on the walls showed dark stains, possibly from prolonged contact with human skin or bodily moisture. Preliminary on-site analysis could not determine the exact nature of these stains, but the investigation team noted them as suspicious signs consistent with an environment regularly occupied by a person. Additionally, the ground in this area had sections that were relatively leveled and flat, in contrast to the uneven and rough floors in other abandoned mines, suggesting human intervention to maintain a usable surface. The technicians also discovered an area resembling a spot used for lighting or heating, a small depression containing old ash and heat-discolored stones, suggesting that small fires had been periodically lit, consistent with long-term residence in an enclosed space. Although no modern items like lamps or batteries were found during the initial examination, the simple yet adaptive structure for living led the investigation team to conclude that there were clear signs of continuous human presence over many years. Upon confirming that this location posed a high risk of direct connection to Elena's disappearance, the field team proceeded to seal the entire area in accordance with procedures for handling critical crime scenes. The entrances were marked, barricaded, and equipped with surveillance cameras to prevent unauthorized access before the forensic team arrived to collect samples. The entire mine area was divided into grids for recording purposes to facilitate later scene mapping, including the positions of items, contact surfaces, areas suspected of containing biological traces, and points with unusually compacted soil. The results of this survey were documented in a report sent to the Investigation Command Center, clearly stating the existence of a space that had been renovated and maintained over a long period, suggesting a high likelihood that this was the location directly related to the prolonged disappearance of Elena Marquez. Immediately after the mine area was sealed, the forensic team began establishing procedures for sample collection by spatial layers, starting with the area identified as having clear signs of habitation. The first task was to collect all remaining biological material on the wooden surfaces, floor, and mine walls. Technicians used broad-spectrum lights to identify points likely to contain skin cells, bodily fluids, or old blood stains. On the wooden plank used as a sleeping area, they discovered numerous short hairs. Some adhered tightly to the wood due to long accumulated moisture in the mine. These hairs were collected using sterile forceps, placed in DNA preservation tubes, and coded by collection location for future comparison. In addition to hairs, technicians noted flaked skin cells on the wall section where the occupant might have leaned, and at a low point near the floor, they found a dark brown streak suspected of long-term oxidation. After testing with a blood detection solution, the result was positive, confirming it as an old blood stain of sufficient value for DNA analysis. All biological samples were packaged according to evidence chain of custody standards and transferred to the forensic laboratory for testing. The DNA results, returned after several days, showed that a portion of the biological samples from hairs, skin cells, and other contact points matched perfectly with Elena Marquez's DNA profile stored in her medical records. This was direct evidence proving that Elena had been present for an extended period in the bunker. However, an even more notable result came from the old blood stain found on the mine floor. The DNA sequence extracted from this blood belonged to a male individual and did not match any DNA in the ORE database or other unidentified samples. When compared to Daniel Cross's DNA, obtained during witness interviews in 2003 and stored in the case file, the laboratory confirmed an absolute match between the blood sample found in the bunker and Daniel's DNA. The discovery of Daniel's biological traces in the space, suspected of being Elena's confinement, created a critical connection in the investigation, providing irrefutable evidence that Daniel had been present there. In addition to DNA testing, the forensic team continued surveying the bunker floor for footwear impressions or characteristic compression marks from human movement in the confined space. Using oblique lighting and casting kits, they identified faint but discernible shoe prints at 2 locations near the exit, sufficient to determine basic size and style. The cast measurements showed size 11 prints, matching the shoe size information for Daniel collected in his personal file 5 years earlier. Soil adhering to the tread patterns on the floor was also collected for comparison with external soil to determine the degree of interaction by the wearer in the mine space. Preliminary analysis of soil compression direction indicated that the size 11 shoe wearer had moved repeatedly in the area, not just briefly. This reinforced the hypothesis that a male individual, most likely Daniel, had used the bunker as a shelter or location for prolonged activity during the time Elena was missing. While sweeping scattered items on the bunker floor, the investigation team discovered numerous small fabric fibers, mostly torn or frayed. Some fibers were tested for material and color, revealing cotton polyester blend in gray-blue, similar to the jacket Daniel was recorded wearing on the 2003 trip according to a witness statement in Array. The match between the fabric and the witness description further strengthened the connection between Daniel and the bunker. Near the wooden shelf against the wall, the team found a small metal box, lightly oxidized but structurally intact, containing $1,000 in cash, consisting of $100 bills produced before 2000. Although the cash bore no personal identifiers, its storage location and long presence in the mine suggested it was intended for transactions or sustaining some activity related to the bunker occupant. Investigators noted this as important indirect evidence in determining motive or resources supporting related conduct. More critically, at the far end of the bunker in a less frequented area, the forensic team discovered a .38 special handgun hidden under a rotted plank. The serial number on the barrel was still legible, and police records confirmed the gun was registered to Daniel Cross in 2001, with no report of loss or sale. The presence of the gun in the suspected confinement space made it a particularly valuable piece of evidence. The forensic team continued testing for fingerprints, sweat residues, or other substances on the gun's surface to clarify its use history. The chain of evidence collected from the bunker, including Elena's DNA, Daniel's DNA, matching shoe prints, fabric consistent with Daniel's clothing, the cash box, and the registered handgun, formed a continuous web of connections, not only confirming Daniel's presence, but also demonstrating his multifaceted interaction with the structure. Individual traces might carry only statistical significance, but combined, they formed a systematic chain of evidence, suggesting a direct and prolonged link between Daniel and the underground space, which shared many characteristics with the environment in which Elena had lived during her disappearance. All data collected from the bunker scene was transferred to the Analysis Center for a comprehensive report, marking a significant advancement in the investigation as isolated clues began coalescing into a logical structure, traceable to the origin of Elena Marquez's confinement. After the bunker evidence directly linked to Daniel Cross, the investigation team shifted to examining all of Daniel's purchases, transactions, and movements in the period before and on the day Elena disappeared to determine whether he had prepared for an intentional act. The first step was extracting bank and credit card transaction history from August to mid-September 2003. The data revealed a series of purchases inconsistent with the needs of a short hiking trip, as Daniel had initially claimed. 3 days before Elena vanished, Daniel bought multiple rolls of heavy-duty nylon zip ties with no clear use for a light outdoor trip. On the same day, he purchased 2 large tarps at an outdoor equipment store in Montrose. Receipts confirmed the tarp purchase just before they left Denver, contradicting Daniel's statement that they carried only minimal gear. In addition to zip ties and tarps, Daniel bought a large quantity of dried food and non-perishable canned goods at a grocery store in Durango about 2 days before the trip. This amount far exceeded the needs of 2 people for a single day of hiking and was not present in the gear when Daniel reported her missing, indicating it had been moved elsewhere. Also in Durango, security cameras captured Daniel in the lighting equipment section purchasing several large halogen batteries, typically used for high-powered handheld lights or in low-light environments. This matched the limited lighting conditions in the bunker and strengthened the link between Daniel and preparation for an enclosed space. Notably, transaction data from September 12 showed Daniel purchasing a detailed topographic map of the San Juan area, marked with mine roads and old added entrances. This map was not found in the vehicle or gear when Daniel reported the disappearance, suggesting it was used for purposes beyond the usual hiking route. The investigation team further analyzed Daniel's fuel card history in the week before Elena vanished. GPS data tied to fuel transactions showed Daniel traveling alone from Denver to Montrose, then to Durango, and back to Array with no charges indicating 2 people. There were no purchases of food or drinks for Elena along the route, contrary to his claim that they prepared together. Daniel's solo travel and stops off main routes suggested he may have secretly transported supplies or stocked a separate location before meeting Elena for the hiking area. When the team cross-referenced real-time transactions with Daniel's original statement, numerous contradictions emerged. Daniel had claimed the hiking trip was spontaneous with minimal preparation and basic gear only. However, purchase history showed days of advanced preparation for restraint, covering, lighting, and long-term storage, items unrelated to a short outing. Daniel also stated they left Denver together, but fuel card data and Durango cameras confirmed he was alone at multiple locations. When questioned about these transactions in a new police interview, Daniel responded only that they were unrelated or that he did not remember each item exactly. Some transactions showed extended stops in remote areas, particularly near routes leading to the Red Mountain #3 cluster, aligning with geological targeting and the discovered bunker location. Additionally, a $1,000 cash withdrawal on September 10 matched the amount found in the metal box in the bunker, creating another link between purchasing behavior and scene evidence. The analysis of Daniel's financial and movement patterns during this period painted a clearer picture of premeditation before Elena's disappearance, with multiple indicators that he planned access to or preparation of a secluded, isolated area. Despite his denials of involvement, the financial records, camera footage, and travel routes clearly showed that Daniel was not merely a companion on the hike, but had executed a series of prearranged actions. This rendered his initial statement entirely unreliable and placed him at the center of the re-examination of all conduct leading up to Elena Marquez's disappearance in 2003. After the data on transactions, travel routes, and physical evidence in the bunker all indicated a direct connection between Daniel Cross and the suspected location where Elena was held, the investigation team expanded the scope of interrogations to individuals who knew Daniel in the period before Elena's disappearance, in order to determine whether anyone else had noticed his unusual behavior. One of the individuals identified as having a notable level of interaction was Marla Nye, Daniel's former co-worker at an outdoor supply store in Denver. Marla was invited to cooperate with the investigating agency to provide information related to Daniel in the time leading up to September 2003. In the first session, Marla stated that Daniel frequently talked about Elena in a way that demonstrated possessiveness and control, especially in the months before she went missing. Marla clearly remembered Daniel complaining multiple times that Elena wasn't obeying anymore, wanted to make too many decisions on her own, and that he felt he was losing control in the relationship itself. These comments, according to Marla, indicated that Daniel had a tendency to want absolute dominance in their shared life and would not accept Elena having independent opinions. The investigating agency noted this testimony because it aligned with the pattern of controlling behavior commonly seen in cases involving coercion or confinement. When asked about specific contacts with Daniel in the time immediately preceding the disappearance, Marla stated that Daniel had once asked her to purchase some items that were later determined to match the shopping list related to preparing the bunker. Marla admitted that she had bought for Daniel some nylon zip ties and a few other miscellaneous items like small tarps and toolboxes, on the grounds that Daniel said he needed them for a long camping trip. When the investigating agency cross-referenced the items Marla purchased with the objects found in the bunker, numerous matches emerged, particularly the type of zip ties with the same size and material as the nylon fibers recovered in one corner of the shaft. The fact that Marla provided this information showed that Daniel had engaged in dispersing his purchase sources to avoid creating a direct trail linked to him, demonstrating proactive preparation for an activity requiring a higher level of secrecy than an ordinary outdoor trip. Marla also clarified that at the time, she didn't think much of Daniel's request because they had a normal co-worker relationship, and Daniel often asked her to buy small items since she worked near the supply store. However, when cross-referenced with the current case file, she recognized that this behavior may have been part of Daniel's preparation plan. When the investigating agency focused on probing the timeline before Elena vanished, Marla recalled that Daniel began showing unusual signs about 2 weeks prior to the disappearance. According to her, Daniel appeared more tense, spoke in fragments, and frequently checked his phone or looked at maps while at work. Marla also remembered one specific occasion when Daniel brought an old San Juan topographic map, spread it out on the break room table, and marked some locations with a pen, but quickly put it away when someone approached. This testimony aligned with transaction data showing that Daniel had purchased a mind map just 2 days before the trip, indicating he had researched the terrain more thoroughly than necessary for a hiking trip. Additionally, Marla mentioned one final conversation right before Daniel left Denver with Elena. At that time, Daniel said something that in retrospect, Marla believed was significant: "There are things that need to be resolved once and for all before everything gets out of hand." Although this statement was not directly threatening, combined with the tense behavior and the unusual items Daniel was preparing, it painted a picture of unstable conduct in the period immediately preceding Elena's disappearance. The investigating agency noted Marla's testimony as indirect evidence supporting the establishment of Daniel's behavioral pattern, showing that he was not only preparing materially, but also undergoing a clear psychological shift, demonstrating a level of obsession and need for control over Elena. Marla's testimony was entered into the case file as an important part in determining Daniel Cross's motive and preparatory behavior before Elena's disappearance, while reinforcing the assessment that these unusual signs did not occur randomly but were part of a deliberate sequence of actions. After Marla Nye's testimony clarified that Daniel Cross had engaged in unusual preparation before the time Elena went missing, the investigation team expanded the scope of verification to individuals who had contact with Daniel during the 2000-2003 period. Among the names that emerged when reviewing Daniel's communication history, transactions, and social relationships, the name Jason Rule stood out as a subject needing interrogation due to multiple overlaps with Daniel's travel and purchasing activities in the time before the disappearance. Jason had worked seasonally at a vehicle repair facility near an area Daniel frequently visited, and the two had multiple contacts in 2003. Cell phone signal data showed they had communicated in the 2 weeks before the trip to Ouray. When initially summoned, Jason denied any involvement and insisted he only knew Daniel casually. However, the investigating agency discovered numerous inconsistencies in his preliminary statement, particularly regarding the timing of his meetings with Daniel near the date of Elena's disappearance. According to records, Jason claimed he did not leave Denver in September 2003, but cell tower data showed his phone was in Montrose on the evening of September 13th, just 1 day before Elena went missing. When asked to explain, Jason provided unconvincing reasons and continuously changed details, prompting the investigation team to issue a warning for providing false statements. To force Jason to confront the evidence, the investigators presented copies of physical evidence recovered from the bunker, including photographs of the cash box containing $1,000 and size 11 shoe prints found alongside compressed soil marks, indicating the movement of two people in the confined space. When confronted, Jason began to waver and no longer maintained his previous tone of denial. When shown the results of soil analysis from samples adhering to Jason's shoes, mineral composition similar to the soil in the bunker, he began to change his attitude and requested to restate the events, but on the condition of legal protection if he cooperated. After being informed that full and truthful testimony was the only factor that could mitigate charges, Jason formally admitted that Daniel had hired him to assist in transporting Elena in the time before she vanished. Jason stated that about a week before the event, Daniel approached him at the garage and proposed that he needed a person transport to a remote location, saying it was a family matter, that Elena was psychologically unstable and needed to be taken to a safe place to prevent her from doing something foolish. Jason was initially suspicious, but Daniel paid $300 up front and promised another $700 upon completion, totaling $1,000, the amount found in the bunker. When asked why he accepted such a vague request, Jason stated that he needed money at the time and believed Daniel's claim that it was not a seriously illegal activity. He did not expect the situation to drag on or have malicious intent as it later developed. Jason described in detail the route Daniel led him on. They went from Ouray onto a side trail, leaving the main road at a point not marked on tourist maps. Daniel directed him to drive up near Red Mountain #3 to a small flat area, where Daniel said he needed to prepare to take Elena down into the mine. Jason stated that Daniel said Elena was not cooperating and might panic, so he had to hold her arms while Daniel temporarily tied her before moving deeper into the shaft. Jason confessed that he and Daniel restrained Elena together, but insisted she was still conscious and not seriously injured at that point, only terrified and resisting. Daniel instructed Jason to keep Elena in a bent position to avoid hitting the rock walls in the narrow entrance. When investigators presented the binding scars around Elena's wrists, Jason confirmed those marks were very likely from the nylon cord Daniel had brought, the same type that Marla had purchased for Daniel. When asked about the setup inside the bunker, Jason stated that Daniel had prepared many items in the shaft beforehand, including tarps, dried food, and reserve water. He said, Daniel appeared very familiar with the tunnel structure and knew how to navigate safely through dangerous steep sections, indicating this was not Daniel's first time there. According to Jason, his task was only to help get Elena down and assist in moving some heavy items. After this was completed, Daniel gave him the remaining money and instructed him never to return to the area. Jason insisted he did not know how long Daniel intended to keep Elena and thought Daniel would remove her after a few days, but when Elena completely vanished from public life, he began to realize the severity but remained silent out of fear of implication. The investigating agency cross-referenced Jason's testimony with physical evidence and found numerous matches, the $1,000 in the bunker, matching shoe-size prints, accurate descriptions of the mine entrance, concealed with new rocks, and the use of nylon cord in restraining Elena. Jason's testimony also aligned with the timing of Daniel's mine map purchase and other items. This cross-referencing made Jason's testimony an important part in establishing the chain of actions from preparation, approaching Elena, entering the bunker, and initial confinement. Although Jason tried to emphasize that he only participated once and did not know Daniel's long-term intentions, the investigation team noted this testimony as the first direct evidence from a witness physically involved in the route taking Elena into the shaft. His testimony, combined with physical evidence from the bunker and Daniel's transaction history, showed that Daniel Cross's behavior was not merely unusual, but a deliberately prepared plan with assistance from others in the initial phase. After Jason Rule admitted his role and stated that another person had also accompanied Daniel to access the bunker in the early stage when Elena was brought into the shaft, the investigation team immediately summoned Cole Maddox, the individual Jason described as someone Daniel trusted more for watching Elena. Cole had a minor prior record related to property theft and had worked seasonally on abandoned mining sites, leading the investigating agency to view him as a subject capable of assisting Daniel in navigating old mine terrain. When Cole was first invited to cooperate, he denied everything and claimed Jason was just trying to shift blame to others. However, the investigation team used data recovered from the bunker, including fabric fiber traces and soil samples, with mineral composition matching the area where Cole had worked according to employment records. Additionally, cell tower data showed Cole's phone had appeared in the vicinity of Red Mountain #3 multiple times during 2003, 2005, something he could not convincingly explain. When investigators presented geological evidence as well as timelines matching the activities Daniel and Jason had described, Cole began to change his attitude. After the investigating agency warned of the possibility of heavier charges if he continued providing false statements, Cole requested to restate the entire events on the condition that his testimony would be considered for sentence mitigation. In the subsequent interrogation session, Cole admitted that he had been with Daniel and Jason in the initial phase when Elena was taken down into the shaft. According to Cole, his role was primarily to assist in moving Elena through narrow sections, ensuring Daniel did not encounter difficulties in getting her into the bunker. He clearly described that Daniel was the one who tied Elena with nylon cord and instructed Cole to hold the flashlight so Daniel could guide Elena through steep and slippery tunnel sections. Cole stated that at that time, Elena was in a state of panic, trying to resist but restricted in movement due to having her hands tied and possibly exhausted after the initial restraint. Cole said he was told by Daniel that Elena was in a crisis and needed to be taken to a safer place, but he admitted that he soon realized this was not assistance but coercion. Cole stated that Daniel had prepared the bunker in advance, including clearing the ground, building a wooden platform, and arranging essential items. When asked about the confinement of Elena in the early stage, Cole said Daniel visited the bunker almost daily in the first few weeks, bringing dried food, water, and new batteries. Cole was hired by Daniel to watch Elena during times when Daniel had to leave the bunker to get more supplies. His role was to stand guard at the entrance, check the headlamp, and ensure Elena did not attempt to escape. He insisted he did not directly injure Elena, but also admitted he did not help her in any way. When the investigation team asked him to describe Elena's condition in the early months, Cole said she gradually weakened due to the lack of light and the cold, damp air in the mine, and Daniel sometimes spent long periods talking to her, but the conversations were essentially monologues, while Elena barely responded. One important detail Cole provided was the timeline of Elena's pregnancy. According to his testimony, around mid-2005, Daniel told Cole that Elena was changing and needed more high-energy food. Cole initially did not understand, but after observing Elena's abdomen growing, he concluded she had become pregnant in the mine environment. Cole stated that Daniel instructed him to assist a few times in preparing a cleaner space and changing bedding in the bunker to create a resting area for Elena. Cole recalled that Daniel maintained absolute control during this time and did not allow him direct contact with Elena, except for guarding or assisting when Daniel was away. When asked about the time Elena gave birth, Cole said it was in 2006, based on estimates from the times Daniel brought additional blankets, warm water, and soft food into the shaft. Cole stated he was not present during Elena's delivery, but Daniel said it needed to be kept completely secret and instructed Cole to stand outside for many hours, guarding the mine entrance. When Daniel left the shaft after the event, he carried infant clothing and said everything was fine. Cole also stated that after the child was born, Daniel reduced the frequency of hiring Cole to watch Elena, but still called him occasionally to help move items or check the stability of collapse prevention boards. The information Cole provided matched medical examination results regarding prolonged lack of light exposure, low bone density, and signs of pregnancy in Elena, reinforcing the authenticity of his testimony. When confronted with the $1,000 found in the bunker, Cole confirmed that Daniel had split that money with Jason and instructed Cole never to mention what was done, because Daniel said he had to maintain this place for many years. Cole said the initial amount Daniel gave him was less, but the $1,000 in the bunker was likely reserve money Daniel used to continue operating the shaft and pay for assistance if needed. Cole's testimony shed light on the prolonged confinement phase and his role during times when Daniel was not directly watching Elena. He insisted he did not know Daniel's long-term plan, but admitted Daniel always intended to keep Elena in the bunker until everything was resolved. The details Cole described about the shaft structure, item placement, and Elena's condition at various timelines all matched forensic data, making his testimony a critical link in determining the method and duration of Elena Marquez's confinement throughout the years she was missing. After cross-referencing the statements of Jason Rule and Cole Maddox with all the physical evidence recovered from the bunker, including Daniel Cross's DNA, matching shoe prints, fabric samples, the $1,000 in cash, and the firearm registered in Daniel's name, the federal investigative team concluded that there was sufficient legal basis to proceed with Daniel's arrest on charges related to the forcible confinement and long-term imprisonment of Elena Marquez. The FBI, in coordination with the prosecutor's office, obtained an emergency arrest warrant based on the highly credible chain of evidence and the statements of the two accomplices, in which both Jason and Cole described in detail the process by which Daniel brought Elena into the bunker, used restraints, and maintained her confinement over many years. Once the warrant was approved by the judge, federal agents began tracking Daniel through cell phone signals and recent financial transactions. Location data showed that Daniel had left Denver and headed west, later appearing at a gas station near Grand Junction. As soon as security camera footage confirmed Daniel's presence in the area, a federal task force was dispatched to carry out a safe arrest. When Daniel left the gas station and got into his vehicle, FBI agents intercepted the car at an intersection a few miles from Grand Junction, using standard containment procedures to prevent any risk of flight or danger. Daniel appeared surprised but did not resist when ordered to exit the vehicle and was handcuffed. He immediately asked the reason for his arrest, and upon being informed that his DNA had been found in an underground facility directly linked to Elena's disappearance, Daniel reacted by denying any involvement and claiming that his DNA might have been planted there. When told that two of his associates, Jason Rule and Cole Maddox, had confessed to their roles in assisting Daniel in placing Elena in the bunker, Daniel continued to deny everything and claimed they were making it up to reduce their own sentences. During transport to a temporary detention center, Daniel remained mostly silent, but showed signs of stress when reminded of the physical evidence recovered from the bunker, particularly the firearm with a serial number registered in his name. Federal investigators noted that Daniel attempted to maintain a complete denial stance, but offered no reasonable explanation for his DNA appearing at multiple locations inside the bunker, or for the shoe prints matching the size he wears. When questioned one final time during the initial post-arrest interview, Daniel continued to insist that he never held Elena captive and claimed that Elena left on her own and is living somewhere, which directly contradicted the medical findings and the actual conditions in which Elena was discovered. Daniel's persistent denial was recorded in the file as the suspect's initial response, while the investigative agency continued to strengthen the chain of events based on the accomplices' statements and the collected forensic evidence. From the moment of Daniel's arrest, the case officially moved into the criminal prosecution phase against the individual considered the mastermind behind Elena Marquez's years-long confinement under harsh conditions in the abandoned mine in the San Juan Range. Based on all the forensic data recovered from the bunker, the statements of Jason Rule and Cole Maddox, Elena Marquez's medical examination results, hair samples, consumption rates of supplies, accumulated CO2 levels in the bunker air, and remaining food quantities, the investigative team reconstructed a detailed timeline of the 5 years Elena was held underground, from her disappearance in 2003 until her escape in 2008. The first key indicator was the mineral dust embedded in Elena's hair, reflecting continuous exposure to the red mica and sulfide characteristic of the abandoned mine environment, indicating she had lived in the enclosed space for at least 4 consecutive years. Combined with Jason's statement that Daniel took Elena into the bunker on the day she went missing, and Cole's account of Daniel frequently visiting the bunker in the early period, the team established that confinement began in September 2003. The first year, from late 2003 to late 2004, was reconstructed based on the consumption of remaining food in storage containers, the number of empty cans, and the inadequate nutritional rations found. Analysis of accumulated co-thighs on wooden surfaces showed only one person living there full-time during this period, consistent with Daniel visiting periodically rather than staying long-term. Living conditions in the first year were assessed as particularly harsh, low temperatures, no stable light source, and limited living space, causing a clear decline in Elena's physical strength. Based on torn fabric scraps used as bedding, investigators determined that Elena likely slept on rough wooden surfaces with virtually no changes to the environment, as the bunker was maintained in a simple and primitive state. Moving into 2004-2005, food consumption patterns changed, indicating Daniel brought more regular and stable supplies. During the same period, Cole's statement described Daniel frequently entering the bunker and showing signs of communicating or monologuing with Elena, reflecting a phase in which Daniel attempted to establish psychological control. Hair and skin samples showed Elena suffered severe light deprivation throughout this period, with sharply reduced vitamin D levels compared to the first year. This was also when the bunker underwent further modifications, additional support beams, storage shelves, and a more leveled dirt floor, consistent with Cole's statement that Daniel wanted to stabilize the living space and prepare for long-term confinement. By mid-2005, signs of pregnancy were confirmed from medical results. Hormone changes in Elena's long hair samples indicated she became pregnant in the second or third quarter of 2005. Cole's statement aligned, as he recalled Daniel requesting better bedding and increased food rations during the time Elena's body was changing. This showed the pregnancy occurred entirely under confinement, without medical care, and with severe nutritional deficiency. Investigators determined that Daniel continued frequent visits to maintain supplies and control Elena, but there was no evidence of anyone else present, consistent with CO2 accumulation and on-site oxygen usage simulations, which indicated only 2 people during this period. In 2006, based on Cole's description of Daniel suddenly requiring him to guard outside the bunker for many hours, investigators concluded Elena likely gave birth in the bunker around mid-year. Physical development tests on the child also indicated birth around 2006, matching medical team estimates based on skull, long bone development, and delayed motor skills due to being raised in confined space. After the birth, remaining food data and scattered empty cans showed increased rations, but still poor quality. Daniel appeared to prepare more for sustaining 2 people in the bunker, but did not improve living conditions, leading to prolonged malnutrition for both mother and child. The 2006-2007 period had the least data due to minimal structural changes in the bunker. However, wear patterns on wooden platforms and dust accumulation showed Elena's activity gradually decreasing, consistent with severe physical exhaustion. Cole's statement that Daniel reduced hiring him for guard duty after the child's birth indicated Daniel handled most entries and exits himself and avoided third-party presence during this phase. Some soil samples near the entrance showed several instances of Daniel moving rocks to clear the path, aligning with weather data showing minor landslides in the winters of 2006 and 2007, requiring Daniel to manually keep the entrance from being completely sealed. In 2007-2008, organic samples in the bunker showed a sharp drop in food consumption rate, possibly due to Daniel reducing supply frequency or facing access difficulties. Dust patterns and compression marks on the dirt floor indicated Daniel's presence became sporadic, with long periods of absence. Investigators assessed that Daniel may have been busy, wanted to reduce detection risk, or intentionally limited access to Elena to reinforce her dependence. Some evidence, such as torn fabric scraps and scratch marks on a wooden section, suggested Elena may have attempted self-escape during this phase, but unsuccessfully. The events leading to Elena's 2008 escape were reconstructed from multiple factors. Cole's statement that Daniel stopped hiring him after 2006, fresh soil on the rocks covering the entrance, indicating incomplete repositioning, and geological analysis showing a minor landslide in early 2008 that weakened the soil structure near the bunker opening. Investigators concluded that part of the rock slid down, creating a natural gap that allowed Elena to find an exit, combined with Daniel's months-long neglect, leaving the entrance less securely covered than before. This time frame matched Elena's appearance near Animas Forks, in an exhausted state, with a roughly 2-year-old child. The synthesis of forensic data, witness statements, and environmental analysis enabled authorities to reconstruct a unified timeline from 2003 to 2008, clearly describing the process of Elena being taken into the bunker, maintained under harsh confinement for years, becoming pregnant and giving birth without medical assistance, before escaping during a natural environmental event. This timeline led to the case being officially reclassified from abduction to prolonged unlawful imprisonment, a particularly serious offense reflecting the full nature of what Elena Marquez endured during her 5 years of disappearance. After the 5-year confinement timeline was reconstructed based on physical evidence, accomplice statements, and forensic analysis results, the prosecutor proposed arranging a direct confrontation between Elena Marquez and Daniel Cross to strengthen the chain of evidence ahead of trial. The confrontation took place in an interrogation room supervised by federal investigators, a behavioral analysis expert, and a prosecutor's representative. Elena was psychologically prepared beforehand and permitted to halt the session at any time if overwhelmed. When Daniel was brought into the room, he immediately tried to create a calm atmosphere, starting by once again denying that he had imprisoned Elena. Daniel attempted to reframe events in a mitigating way, claiming Elena left of her own accord, sought shelter, and that he only provided remote assistance at certain points, completely contrary to the chain of events established by physical evidence. When questioned about his DNA in the bunker, shoe prints, firearm, and cash matching the withdrawn amount, Daniel tried to explain that the bunker was unrelated and that he had visited it many years before Elena disappeared, ignoring forensic findings that the timing of surface interactions matched Elena's confinement period. When presented with Jason and Cole's statements for confrontation, Daniel immediately denied them, claiming they were fabricating to gain legal benefits. However, when asked to explain why the two statements aligned with physical evidence and forensically confirmed timelines, Daniel began evading, giving inconsistent answers, sometimes falling into prolonged silence, unable to address key points. In the portion where Elena was questioned, she did not engage deeply in dialogue with Daniel, but confirmed the accuracy of major timeline milestones. The moment she was taken into the bunker, phases of bunker modifications, the 2005 pregnancy, and the 2006 birth. As the prosecutor recounted key periods, Elena nodded, or gave brief confirmations without elaborating but without rejecting any point. This consistency further reinforced the forensic timeline's value. When Daniel tried to influence by saying Elena doesn't remember everything accurately due to psychological factors, Elena did not react strongly, only looking down, but her confirmation of critical milestones undermined Daniel's argument. Throughout the confrontation, the BOU expert observed Daniel's reactions, noting multiple behavioral signs that he attempted to control the interrogation space by proactively steering topics, dodging direct questions, and shifting blame to the victim or accomplices. The BO assessed that Daniel exhibited a pattern of viewing himself as the center of power in the relationship, with clear controlling behavior, denying reality, rewriting the narrative for personal benefit, minimizing responsibility, and trying to maintain psychological dominance over the victim. When asked about the child's presence, Daniel completely evaded, calling Elena's bunker pregnancy her own affair and denying any involvement. This was flagged by BO as high-level avoidance, since material samples and traces in the bunker all reflected the prolonged presence of an infant from 2006 to 2008. At the end of the confrontation, when the prosecutor asked if Daniel completely denied all evidence, DNA, shoe prints, accomplice statements, bunker items, forensic reports, and the timeline, Daniel said everything has been misunderstood, but provided no reasonable explanation for the consistency across independent sources of evidence. Elena left the interrogation room with psychological medical support, while the BOS finalized the behavioral analysis profile, concluding that Daniel's behavioral pattern matched an individual with extreme controlling tendencies, long-term planning, and comprehensive denial when confronted. This profile was forwarded to the prosecutor for inclusion in the prosecution file, while also reinforcing the argument that Daniel's mitigating narrative was inconsistent with empirical evidence and the established chain of events. The trial of Daniel Cross began in late 2008 and extended into early 2009, attracting significant public attention due to the particularly severe nature of the case and the length of time Elena Marquez had been missing. The proceedings were conducted in strict accordance with regulations, starting with the prosecution's opening statement, which outlined the structure of their arguments and presented the entire chain of forensic evidence integrated into a tightly logical system. The prosecutor began by describing the overall picture of the case, a disappearance that had lasted 5 years, seemingly without clues, but ultimately unraveled when Elena was found in a state of extreme debilitation, along with a child approximately 2 years old. The prosecution then presented layers of evidence in chronological order and by degree of connection, starting with soil analysis, followed by the bunker examination, then DNA, financial transactions, witness testimonies, and accomplice statements, and finally, the forensic timeline detailing Elena's confinement in the mine from 2003 to 2008. This chain of reasoning was constructed to prove that Daniel Cross was not only involved, but was the mastermind who organized the abduction, transportation, and sustained confinement of Elena in an enclosed space for many years. The prosecutor explained to the jury how mineral analysis had shifted the investigation from a traceless disappearance to identifying the bunker's location. Red mica and characteristic minerals in the soil, adhering to Elena's shoes, hair, and clothing, were proven to match old silver mining areas in the San Juan Mountains. The prosecution then described how LiDAR and GPR processes narrowed down suspect locations from 148 mines to 12, ultimately leading the investigation team to the bunker near Red Mountain #3. This laid a crucial foundation for the next section, the bunker examination. Here, the prosecutor meticulously described the physical evidence: a wooden platform used as a sleeping area, traces of daily living, stains on the tunnel walls, dried food, tarps, debris, and ash marks, indicating long-term human habitation. The prosecutor emphasized that the bunker was not a natural mine shaft, but showed numerous signs of modification, proving that the person actively using it had spent time altering the internal structure to maintain a basic living space. Next, the prosecution focused on DNA, one of the most compelling pieces of evidence. Elena's DNA was found in multiple locations within the bunker, reinforcing the conclusion that she had lived there for years. Male DNA discovered in bloodstains on the tunnel floor was tested and matched perfectly with Daniel Cross's DNA. In presenting this to the court, the prosecutor stated that this was not a coincidental trace or analytical error, but a highly conclusive sample obtained from a location, likely involving forceful contact, indicating Daniel's presence in the bunker during Elena's confinement. At the same time, the prosecution added important indirect evidence, size 11 shoe prints found in the bunker, matching Daniel's shoe size, fabric fibers recovered from the tunnel, matching the material of a jacket Daniel wore in 2003, a $1,000 cash stash in a metal box matching a withdrawal before Elena's disappearance, and a gun with a serial number registered to Daniel, found in a hard-to-access spot in the bunker. Following the DNA and physical evidence section, the prosecution moved to financial transactions and Daniel's preparatory behavior. Shopping records for zip ties, tarps, dried food, halogen batteries, and mind maps, all purchased 1 to 3 days before Elena's disappearance, were presented to the court, proving intentional preparation. Surveillance footage from Durango showed him conducting these transactions alone, contradicting his claim that Elena accompanied him throughout the trip. Fuel card history also proved Daniel traveled solo to multiple locations near the Red Mountain #3 mine cluster, reinforcing the argument that he had scouted the confinement site in advance. The prosecution then called indirect witnesses, particularly Marla Nye. Marla testified that Daniel exhibited erratic emotional shifts, made numerous controlling statements, and asked her to purchase items matching the evidence found in the bunker. This testimony helped establish Daniel's psychological context before the incident and showed prolonged preparatory behavior. In the accomplice testimony section, the prosecution called Jason Rule and Cole Maddox to the stand. Jason stated that Daniel hired him to help transport Elena into the tunnel on the day she disappeared and paid him upfront an amount matching the cash found in the bunker. Jason described in detail the route taken, how Daniel led the way, and the process of restraining Elena. Cole Maddox clearly outlined his role in watching Elena when Daniel temporarily left the bunker, while providing detailed information about her 2005 pregnancy and the 2006 birth of the child in the tunnel. The prosecution used these testimonies to bolster the forensic timeline constructed during the investigation. Each statement was cross-referenced with physical evidence, DNA, shoe prints, and soil samples to prove authenticity. As the prosecution concluded, Daniel's defense attorney attempted to counter by arguing that the accomplices were lying to reduce their own sentences and that the bunker might have been used by someone else in the past. They tried to convince the jury that there was no direct evidence of Daniel forcing Elena into the bunker and that it was possible Elena got lost and hid in the tunnel to survive, an argument quickly refuted by the prosecution with medical and forensic results. When the defense raised the notion of voluntariness, the prosecution requested the medical reports be represented, showing Elena's prolonged lack of sunlight, restraint scars on her wrists, low bone density, and chronic stress responses, signs that could not occur if Elena had voluntarily sheltered there. Daniel Cross was called to the stand at the request of his defense attorney. In his testimony, Daniel continued to deny everything, saying everyone misunderstood the truth, but when cross-examined by the prosecution with specific pieces of evidence, he failed to provide consistent explanations. When asked why his DNA appeared in multiple locations inside the bunker, Daniel replied that it could be cross-contamination, but forensics confirmed the DNA was embedded in old sediment layers on surfaces, impossible to contaminate during the investigation phase. When asked why size 11 shoe prints appeared throughout the bunker used over many years, Daniel had no answer. When asked why his gun was in the tunnel, Daniel said he didn't remember selling or giving it to anyone, but registration records showed he had never reported it lost or transferred. The prolonged inconsistencies led Daniel's testimony to be deemed lacking credibility. A bio-expert was subsequently called to present Daniel's behavioral profile, showing he exhibited typical controlling patterns, long-term planning ability, denial, and manipulation, consistent with the reconstructed chain of actions. After both sides completed their arguments, the jury was instructed to deliberate based on criteria drawn from the forensic evidence chain, witness testimonies, and timeline. Deliberations lasted many hours, during which the jury reviewed forensic documents and witness statements to assess the reliability of each link in the overall evidence structure. After many hours of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom and announced they had reached a unanimous verdict on the major charges in the case. Based on the forensic evidence chain, accomplice testimonies, bunker examination results, behavioral analysis, and the detailed reconstructed 5-year confinement timeline, the jury concluded that Daniel Cross was guilty of kidnapping, prolonged unlawful imprisonment, intentional physical and psychological abuse against Elena Marquez, and placing the child born under confinement in serious danger. When the court requested confirmation of unanimity on each charge, the jury foreperson confirmed that all 12 members agreed that the DNA evidence, financial transactions, testimonies of Jason Rule and Cole Maddox, geological and forensic data from the bunker formed an irrefutable system of proof. The prosecutor requested the maximum sentence for Daniel due to the prolonged nature, sophisticated preparation, and cruelty of confining Elena for consecutive years. After considering the severity of the crimes and aggravating factors presented during trial, the judge sentenced Daniel Cross to life imprisonment without parole, emphasizing that this penalty appropriately reflected the danger and prolonged intent of the entire conduct. The sentence was delivered in a heavy atmosphere, as the court noted that Elena Marquez was unable to give a lengthy statement but confirmed her desire for protection from any risk of Daniel regaining access, if not sentenced to the maximum severity. Following the sentencing of Daniel, the court proceeded to address the remaining defendants based on their roles, degree of involvement, and cooperation with investigators. Jason Rule, who admitted to assisting in transporting Elena into the bunker in the initial phase and helping Daniel lower her into the tunnel, received consideration for reduction due to his cooperation and verification of key events. However, because Jason's actions directly contributed to placing Elena in confinement, the court sentenced him to 28 years in prison. In announcing the sentence, the judge stressed that Jason's provision of information aiding the case resolution did not erase criminal responsibility for the initial acts. For Cole Maddox, determined to have overseen Elena during Daniel's absences and provided support multiple times over the confinement period, his involvement was deemed more prolonged and impactful than Jason's. Although Cole also cooperated and detailed Daniel's actions, the court found he had sustained support over many years, directly contributing to Elena's isolation in the bunker. Therefore, Cole Maddox was sentenced to 40 years in prison, a term reflecting the repetitive and extended nature of his conduct. Separately, Marla Nye, though not directly involved in the confinement, was found to have supplied items to Daniel during preparation and known partially of his unusual behavior without alerting authorities. The court considered that Marla did not know the full nature of the case but still played an indirect role in supporting Daniel's chain of actions, leading to Elena's confinement. Accordingly, Marla was sentenced to 12 years in prison, a lower term due to her limited involvement and cooperation during the investigation. After announcing all sentences, the judge formally declared the case closed at the initial trial level, noting that the entire investigation, interrogation, and trial process had clearly established the responsibility of each defendant. The case file was archived in the system under the classification Prolonged Intentional Confinement, marking the conclusion of one of the most complex investigations in the San Juan region in decades. After the verdicts were announced and the official trial records were closed, Elena Marquez and her son were transferred to a victim support center in New Mexico to ensure they had a safe and stable environment to begin the psychological recovery process. After years of living in captivity, therapists, assessed that Elena exhibited multiple symptoms of prolonged trauma, including heightened reactions to confined spaces, constant defensive states, and prolonged avoidance of social interaction, while the child showed signs of developmental delays in certain motor skills and light reflexes due to extended periods in a stimulus-deprived environment. The medical team, working with psychologists, developed a long-term treatment plan for the mother and son in which Elena was supported to gradually regain emotional autonomy and rebuild trust in social environments, while the child participated in specialized motor and language development programs. Recovery progressed slowly but steadily, and after many months, Elena began to engage in light daily activities and accept the presence of some family members after being assisted in reconnecting in a safe setting. While Elena and her son began their journey to stabilize their lives in New Mexico, Elena's family, along with anti-missing persons organizations, collaborated to establish a support fund called the Marquez Recovery Fund to help survivors of long-term abductions access medical, psychological, and legal assistance. The fund not only aided similar cases, but also sponsored awareness programs about the risks of prolonged captivity and warning signs in personal relationships, helping communities recognize and respond promptly to potential coercive control violence. Elena's family members, who had endured years of uncertainty about her whereabouts, now actively managed the fund with the goal of turning their family's tragedy into motivation to help other victims. In parallel, the Rangers and SAR team from Ouray County conducted a comprehensive review of the 2003 search procedures. They examined each phase of the initial search, the factors that prevented the rescue team from discovering the bunker, and why minor reports, such as strange lights near Red Mountain #3, were not properly followed up. The evaluation report revealed that in 2003, survey tools, like LiDAR and GPR, were not widely deployed in missing persons cases, and rapid terrain changes significantly hindered searches. However, the Elena Marquez case prompted park management and SAR agencies to introduce new protocols, including requirements for deeper geological analysis when victims appeared to have left trails, as well as recommendations to inspect abandoned mines in a wider radius, even without clear signs of human presence. Thanks to these changes, SAR teams in Colorado and many other states updated their search procedures, incorporating high-tech tools more routinely and collaborating more closely with geologists in mountainous missing persons cases. From a societal perspective, the Elena Marquez case became a prominent example of how a seemingly hopeless missing persons investigation could be resolved through the combination of modern forensics, accomplice testimony, and investigative persistence. Many sociologists viewed the case as a reminder of the dangers of controlling behavior in personal relationships, a precursor to more serious crimes like kidnapping and prolonged detention. Community organizations in Colorado organized numerous workshops and prevention programs to raise public awareness of warning signs in power-imbalanced relationships. The case also pushed state authorities to consider improving early reporting mechanisms for victims showing signs of threat or excessive control. On the legal front, the case became a reference in federal investigative training, particularly regarding crime scene assessment in confined spaces and long-term captivity crimes. Investigators from multiple states studied the files to understand how a 5-year-old case could be cracked through the smallest clues, such as mineral samples in soil, food consumption patterns, or evidence hidden in hard-to-access spaces. Colorado courts also used the case as an example of applying advanced forensic technology in handling highly concealed crimes. After the judgments were announced and the sentences took effect, the case file was closed, according to legal procedures. Related documents were archived for research and training purposes, while some information was released to the press and public under judicial transparency rules, excluding sensitive details related to the identity and privacy of Elena and her son. For Elena, the closure of the file marked a significant turning point in her recovery journey, allowing her to move forward without being tied to prolonged legal proceedings. For the community, the Elena Marquez case left profound lessons about the fragility of personal safety, the importance of timely search systems, and the decisive role of forensic science in uncovering the truth. The Elena Marquez case, though it unfolded in the Colorado mountains more than 2 decades ago, still reflects many issues facing American society today: intimate partner violence, psychological control, long-term victim isolation, and gaps in risk reporting mechanisms. Details in the story, such as Daniel Cross gradually controlling Elena's life before her disappearance, or Marla Nee noticing unusual behavior but not reporting it, illustrate how domestic violence often begins with subtle control before escalating to extreme acts. In the modern context, where U.S. experts consider coercive control a key predictor of serious crime, Elena's story serves as a reminder not to dismiss early warning signs. Another critical detail is the limitations in the initial 2003 search reports of unusual lights near Red Mountain #3 were overlooked due to insufficient evidence. This highlights real-world challenges in handling uncertain information. Today, many SAR agencies and rescue organizations have improved procedures by learning from cases like this, using technologies like LiDAR, GPR, and geological analysis to expand search scopes when victims may be held in confined spaces. The lesson for American society is not only to invest in technology, but more importantly, to encourage communities to report any suspicious signs, no matter how small. From Daniel purchasing tarps and zip ties to the controlling statements Marla overheard, each detail could be part of a larger picture. Practical advice for everyone is to trust your instincts, recognize signs of controlling behavior, and intervene or report when necessary. In a society that values individual freedom like the United States, personal safety depends not only on laws, but also on the community's ability to recognize and act before it's too late. Thank you for following this haunting story of Elena Marquez's survival journey. If you found the video helpful, please subscribe so you don't miss the next in-depth case analyses. See you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring stories that remind us of the importance of vigilance, safety, and resilience.